Vagrancy Act, good vibrations, and strange vegetables. Welcome to Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Now, for today, here's our first thought.
Concrete pillow. They say when streets are paved with gold, folk can quickly get ahead, unless your head is uncomfortable and cold, and the streets are your bed. Now, rough sleeping will be decriminalised next year under the UK government's plans to scrap a 200-year-old law. Now, many ministers are planning to scrap the Vagrancy Act because it basically will stop the rough sleeping in England and in Wales. Now, this law was introduced way back in 1824, basically to deal with the rising homelessness. Mr. Pete, I ask you, it seems that this could be a good thing for some, but it's also caused some controversy. What say you about the removal of the Vagrancy Act?
Well, I think it's part of a whole package of changes which are making it more difficult to keep law and order in place for the majority of what I might loosely call normal people. Now, for example, if you're someone who ends up sleeping rough, you're not normal. You're not part of the normal economy in the land. So you need to be cared for. But you're not really cared for by letting you just sleep wherever you like. You're cared for if people actually make a positive move towards looking after you, perhaps providing places for you to stay. Now, I say this, but we'll come back to the actual repeal of the Act. I say this because during the COVID times that people try and pretend didn't happen, when we had lockdowns and people pretended that somehow the sort of disease that was usually only spread indoors amongst people you know was somehow going to be spread by someone next to you on the street, where the wind blows, etc. That sort of nonsense made this happen. There was no vagrancy. People were not sleeping on the streets. They were all put somewhere. So if we could do it then, we can do it now. So we should make that. Let me put that up first. Let's sort out this issue. Secondly, let's care for people. Now, a Bible verse often used here is to say, to quote from Deuteronomy 15:11, for there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, and to the poor in your land. But this shouldn't be applied falsely to the people who are, sleeping in a doorway, just need somewhere to sleep. It applies to them, but it also applies to the people who need to take their children to school, who need to get into the shop, or in order to get their food for the week, whatever it might be. We need to care for all people who are in need in the land, not just the people sleeping on the floor. So I think without first putting something in to replace it, I mean, it's part of a whole, my understanding is it's part of a whole reorganising on how police address crime and sentencing in the country. But what it isn't doing is replacing like with like. We don't have a new Vagrancy Act in place. So this is, maybe I'm reading it wrong. It looks to me like it's not very well thought through.
Well, I think that this is the key. Now, Angela Rayner, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, has said that the actual Vagrancy Act from 1824 is cruel and outdated. Now, that may be the case. In fact, many homeless charities have long called for the Vagrancy Act to be scrapped. But when you actually scrap it, you do need something to replace it. In my opinion, yes, exactly. I would say that what should be done, to your point, is that you don't want then a plethora of people just simply using that as an excuse to use the streets as an opportunity to just simply lay their head wherever they want to. Now, most people don't choose to sleep on the streets. Certainly very few. And of course, they really need help. And to your point, what I think the law could do, if there were to be a scrapping, or should we say a development or a new law, where maybe there's something where they can actually go to a centre and they are rehoused, or they're given education, or they're given some form to get them back into society. Because to your point, yes, what you want is you don't want those individuals to hinder business or hinder social life, general life, and that's something that could cause conflict. And we don't want that. But the point here is that the Vagrancy Act, if that were to be the case, or however it was going to be renamed, does need to help people to get off the streets. Now, the fact is that we're in times where people are struggling. People are struggling to pay their
Yes.
bills, they're struggling to stay at home and pay
Yeah.
their mortgages. And one of the reasons why this subject has come to the surface is that there are a lot of people are either losing their homes or can't pay their rent. And so that means that there comes a point when more, by the nature of the economy, if the economy gets worse, more people go out on the streets. So to me, I think I do agree. I think politicians just need to think before they act, because the danger is
Yes.
the danger here is that the act itself could be worse. Dare I say?
One proposal that I've heard brought up time and again is the local councils in Britain have a duty to house, but their duty to house doesn't seem to apply to people who have no address in the first place. It's just a weird situation.
Yeah.
If you're kicked out of an address, they then have to provide you with a new one. That's how it works. And during my work working with people who've been made homeless, I came across this problem. If they've just been homeless for a long time, it's very difficult to find them anywhere. And there are some hostels that will take them, but they have been overcrowded. I mean, there's been a huge increase in homelessness since well, people were saying between 2010 and 2017 there were surveys of it. It's more than doubled. So, that just shows you that it's been increasing. No, there was that change during the COVID times, but it's back. So, what to do? Well, yeah, you need to have a joined up approach, as you suggest. You can't just say, right, you've now got a duty to house everyone. What you need to do is bring together people who have expertise in this area. I guess this would be the Mark and Pete mantra is localism. Localism important. Local charities which have expertise in this area, involve them, give some funding to them, get them involved in how to get people off the street, and have a coordinated approach with the new law that you bring in as you scrap the old one. That's what I think you should do.
Well, indeed. And in fact, actually, many councils are due to increase their charges. But I mean, I'm sure that most people would think if they were contributing to some form of worthy cause that would ironically managed by the council, I think that this was something that would be money well spent. Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's move on to our next story, which is really a little bit sad, but let's give a little bit of praise to a great talent. Surfing sounds. The Beach Boys made a lot of noise and sang about surfing sound sensations. As each fan enjoys perfect pitch and noise, they gave us good vibrations. Yes, indeed. Well, the sad parting of Brian Wilson, the legend, who was originally the frontman of the Beach Boys. He died very recently at the age of 82. There have been many, many tributes to him, many people within the industry and many others from politicians and others who've enjoyed Brian Wilson's music. Mr. Pete, I ask you, what do you think about some of the comments that have been made? He's been hailed as a musical genius and certainly has left us with a wonderful music legacy. What say you?
Yes. Yes. Well, here's the thing. When someone has a great creative talent and makes such a great contribution to people's lives. Music is part of people's lives. Depending on what age they hear it at the first time, it can be very influential. If it's early on in your life, it can be very influential, even on the way that you live your life. And with the sort of acknowledged spiritual elements to his music, I think that he's made a great contribution. But of course, well, you will know more about him than me, as I'm not a big music fan, but I'm aware that he had a troubled life, struggling with mental health. But this it seems to be almost that this is always the case. I don't know whether it has to be, but it seems to be that great talents also have great problems. It's be it alcoholism, not or mental health, or whatever it might be. Mental health can mean covers a whole panoply of different things. But great artists seem to suffer in some way, have some sort of problem that they overcome. Um, it's interesting if you look at the great talents like this. It's I think it's a bit like I know that I'm a Christian and people might expect me to do a Bible verse, which I'll come to in a minute. But it's a bit like in Star Wars. Bear with me. When Obi-Wan Kenobi notices that a whole planet has winked out of existence, we can here imagine that the whole planet is Brian Wilson's great creativity. And he says, there's been a disturbance in the Force, as if a whole planet, and he goes on. But there's been a disturbance in the Force with Brian Wilson's death. And in the Bible, it says like this. So if we can, it's not going to become Saint Brian or anything like that, but we can say, well, as he's made this musical and spiritual contribution, precious in the sight of the Lord as the death of his saints, it says in Psalm 116. I believe great creativity always comes from God, so we can rejoice that some of God's creativity was challenged, not challenged, channeled is the word I meant to say, through Brian Wilson. What do you think? And what about the issues in his life?
I am going to say that, in my opinion, I mean, I love a lot of 60s music, and without any doubt, the Beach Boys ranks up very highly. When you think of a lot of the songs that he wrote, and we'll call upon some of them in a minute, but what's interesting is some of the tributes. So some of the greatest pop stars of time, people like Sir Paul McCartney, have recognized Brian Wilson as being a sort of a positive rival. But one comment that he made, which I thought was quite poignant, says the notes he heard in his head and passed to us were simple and brilliant at the time. How we will continue without Brian Wilson, God only knows. Thank you, Brian. Now, of course, the point behind that is God Only Knows was probably, in Paul McCartney's view, one of the best pop songs of all time. I think it was. It's very poignant. If you listen to the lyrics, it's very flows perfectly, and it's almost timeless. Many people have actually sort of used that in celebrations of people who have either passed away, and they've used that song. But what's interesting about the mental side of it, now Brian Wilson was a creative genius even in his own day, when he was actually sort of leading and actually performing. But I think that this comes back to the pressure you mentioned about creative geniuses. In Brian Wilson's case, he did suffer a mental breakdown. What actually happened was he was actually under so much pressure to continue the success, because he was writing not on his own. There were other people within his group that actually contributed, Mike Love and Al Jardine and many others within the group that were actually sort of helping him. But the pressure was on Brian, and he was writing an album called Smile, and he just couldn't finish it. And unfortunately, he withdrew. Now, of course, the other problem, which some people will point to, is the drugs. Yes, that was a contributing factor, but there's also about the pressures. But what's interesting is that there are just some individuals who just stand out. When I think of the songs like I Get Around, Help Me Rhonda, Good Vibrations, I mean, Good Vibrations in itself is a masterpiece, not just in terms of creative writing, but in production. Some of the techniques that they used at the time, the recording techniques, production techniques, were fantastic and still stand up today. They're great masterpieces in themselves. So to me, I would certainly put him in the top 10 of best writers of all time. Some people might say he should be higher than that, but he's definitely in there. And I would say that here's the other point. I don't think his songs are going to go away. I think that many people will look back on his legacy, and let's continue to enjoy the Beach Boys forevermore. Why not? Now let's move on to our next story, which is, shall we say, something which has a little bit of a theme here, is top of the crops. Yes, indeed. Now, if you were a vegetable, what would you prefer to be? perhaps a knobbly potato, or possibly a garden pea? Could you be a carrot top or a very big bunch of broccoli, soiled, uprooted, or gone to seed? That's how most humans look to me. Yes. Well, now you might think, what's going on here? Well, let's turn to the annual Lambeth Country Show. Yes, well, as you will all know, that this is famous for what is the free festival that actually is pivoted around a competition in the form of vegetables. Yes, it's making star names out of vegetables. Now, what's interesting at this particular event is that the witty public came up with carved vegetables in sculpture form of famous figures such as Dolly Parton, the Pope, Mo Salah, and many others, Mr. Pete. This is a light-hearted subject, I realise, but let me ask you, first of all, what you think of this event, and can you think of anybody that you'd like to make a little vegetable sculpture from?
Yes. Well, for what I think this is a brilliant event. I would love to have attended. Not as a vegetable, but as myself. I kind of think of anyone. I believe you have on your list there some amusing names for figures.
I do.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to call out a couple. So first of all, the famous Mo Salah from Liverpool is a football player, folks, for those who don't know. He was carved in little fake figurine form called Mo Salad, which I thought was very funny. Brilliant. And, of course, there's one of the Pope, which is the Papal Corn Clave. Very good. Well done.
Yes. Instead of a conclave. Yes, yeah. And I assume, I don't have the images in front of me, that he was actually a corn on the cob carved.
Well, he has that element to him, yes.
He has that element to him, okay. Yes, well, I mean, I think with some... Now, I would say within British politics, if we take Keir Starmer, for example, take Keir Starmer, I wish somebody would.
Yes.
It may be a bit unkind, but he looks like a vegetable already, a sort of immovable. Maybe, maybe he's sort of like
an onion. He looks like an onion that's sort of swept, where the way his hair is swept round.
Maybe more. Yes, I hadn't thought of that. I see. So the little root things you have at the top of the onion, you have that? That is his hair swept back. Yes, I see that now. No, I take it back. Yeah, an onion, not a turnip. Yes, yeah, he would be a turnip. Now, an onion rather, not a turnip. Now, Nigel Farage is very famous at the moment. Oh. Now, someone not years ago referred to him as looking like a condom with a face drawn on it, and I think there's something of that in him. So if he's sort of maybe
not really a vegetable, though, is
it? With a face drawn on it. Yeah, no, but like maybe something
disqualified already.
That sort of stick-like shape. I would say he would be a piece of celery with a face drawn on the end. Yeah, that's how I see it. But they both have the useful feature of not really having necks. Both Keir Starmer and Nigel Farage, which is a useful feature. I would encourage more politicians not to have necks, then it's easier to lampoon them with vegetables.
Boris Johnson is always a good one. He looks like a sort of half-peeled banana to me.
That fluffy hair, it could be numerous different vegetables. It could be grated cheese on potato.
Well, you see,
on a potato with grated cheese on mine. Yeah. So that could be it. Yeah. So I mean, but I suppose the thing is that we have to acknowledge here, Mr. Mark, is that although we're seeing this, for the conspiracy theorists among you, just listen to this. Although we're seeing this in this local country fair, often the globalists, the cabal of people running the world, introduce these ideas to show you what's happening. There's a film about the release of a virus years before it actually happens, and it's like the same plot, and various things like that happened over the years. Here we have politicians, great and world leaders being represented by vegetables. Are they in fact vegetables? And no one's told us.
Well, I don't know, but let's ask our listeners where their family roots go back, and and who would they like to see in the form of a vegetable sculpture?
Yes, let us know. Do an X post or tweet, whichever take your fancy, in response to this, or simply go to the website markandpete.com. You can just check that you're subscribed, and you can make a comment on this and in fact every episode. We'd love to hear from you. But for Mark and myself, that's it for this week. Catch you next time.